Back to School is a 1986 American comedy film directed by Alan Meter, starring Rodney Dangerfield, Keith Gordon, Robert Downey Jr., Sally Kellerman, William Zabka, and Sam Kinison.
Guess who's getting some class?
I'm going to college.
Rodney Dangerfield's going back to school.
And that's what I call marine biology. When I used to dream about going to college, this is the way I always pictured it.
Wait a minute, when did you dream about going to college?
When I used to fall asleep in high school. Good teacher. He really seems to care. About what, I have no idea.
He's the wildest man on campus.
Shake it up, baby!
Say when.
Right after this drink.
Rodney Dangerfield, back to school.
Welcome back to the Cult of Films. I'm John, the host, and today we are talking about a 1986 film. We have resident yuckster Jason Alt, and for the first time, our field critic, writer Corey Dawson. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me tonight.
My pleasure, man.
I just wanted it to be silent for a while, just so it was super awkward.
This is a signature Jason Alt pick, if there ever was one.
That's right, Kalamazoo. I see you've heard of it. Who's drinking? Yeah, that's right. I'm drinking too.
So, as a comedian, how influential do you consider Rodney Dangerfield to you personally, sir?
I don't respect Rodney Dangerfield. It's what he would have wanted.
There goes the neighborhood, as said on his tombstone. Who were your influence coming up the stand-up circuit?
I don't know if anybody influenced my comedy necessarily. Rodney Dangerfield was a little before my time, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's the Seinfeld wasn't funny trope. You wear this where everyone is like, oh, Seinfeld wasn't funny, when a lot of stuff on Seinfeld doesn't hold up because everybody that came after Seinfeld did all that stuff, and you're like, oh, this is hacky, when in reality they were groundbreaking.
But the reservation keeps the car here. That's why you have the reservations.
I know why we have reservations.
I don't think you do.
Looking backward at comics, you kind of get that effect. Same thing with Richard Pryor, who was in another William Metter movie. He was in Moving. Which
Ooh, big one of my kid right there.
We should do that next.
Yeah.
Moving Rules. Yeah, you look at Richard Pryor and some of the stuff, you're like, why was this funny? Well, he was the first one to say stuff like that. So I think people kind of lose sight of why somebody was groundbreaking, and sort of like, oh, well, everything he's saying is kind of tired now, when in reality they were the reason that kind of stuff was popularized. So I don't think Rodney Dangerfield's random self-deprecating one-liners influenced me at all, but I certainly liked watching all of his...
My arms around him, yes, and drew him down to me so he could feel my breasts all perfumed, yes, and his heart was going like mad, and yes, I said, yes, I will, yes.
Yes! Yes!
Deeply stupid film.
Corey, I assume you're on the road to spread the good word about the legend of the Triple Lindy, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I went to Wisconsin earlier this week just to make sure they had enough boards set up at all times, just in case there was a slightly overweight aging man that would walk in and just do that. Just, on spec.
What is your history with this film? Because I know that you were quite a fan.
I'd have to say, definitely. I saw it. We're a big family where HBO came into the family, and all of a sudden everything revolved around HBO. So Back to School was on HBO at least once a week. Mm. So I've seen it a trillion times, but I'd have to say that because of that, or just incidental to that, I ended up finding out about Phyllis Diller and kind of like the Dean Martin roasts and all these old school comics and stuff. And because of that, I ended up having an affinity for the really super old school, dry, I mean, like he was saying, like hacky, or at least we consider it a hacky now. I was actually, when you were talking about that, I wonder if there is a term for that. Like, for instance, with like Double Indemnity, I've shown people Double Indemnity in the past, and everyone's like, oh, I've seen movies like this before 1,000 times. And it was like, well, it's because this is where like that came from. Like, when someone kind of breaks that ground then when it happens later, or even like, or when it's happened so many times, somebody sees the origin of it and then they kind of criticize it. There's got to be a term for it somewhere. I'm going to call it the Seinfeld effect in honor of you, until I find the actual word for it.
You did it, Jason.
I mean, that's a TV tropes thing.
Yeah.
Because they end up invariably having to explain what it is.
Yeah.
And then I understand, but, I don't know the trope term for it yet.
Yeah, this felt like a lot of things. It definitely felt like a Harold Ramis film, and he was one of the screenwriters. His major contribution to the film was making sure that Thornton Mellon stayed a millionaire, because there was talks that they wanted to put him in financial straits to make it make more sense, to like another reason to go back in college, because he would have to go back and get another job. But it was Harold Ramis like, no, just make him a billionaire.
Thornton, I'd like you to meet Mr. and Mrs. Stuyvesant.
Oh, right.
How do you do, Thornton?
I know.
Just that's going to be the joke type deal. But there's definitely some John Hughes in here. It feels like a boner comedy. This is the 80s, trope genre comedy soup. It has everything. You have major players playing supporting characters in here. You had Oingo Boingo as a house band. You have sports drama. You have training montage. Top all that with Dangerfield's one-line zingers.
All right, officer. Hey, a little something for the kids. Okay, take that. It's okay, huh?
I don't have any kids.
No, because we're here. Get yourself some kids. We're here. Take it all right? And just remember, the best thing about kids is making them.
It's the perfect storm for 80s comedy, but it feels like it's kind of faded from the zeitgeist a little bit. Why do you think that is?
I guess in my case, the only thing I can think of is just lack of exposure. The only reason why I even knew that it existed is because it was such a scheduling masterpiece for HBO all the time, where I'd be seeing it constantly. I think that the Triple Lindy still comes up. In fact, I was wondering if it was Triple Lindig my entire life until I looked up things. I looked at closed captioning and it says Triple Lindy. People always said Triple Lindy. I guess it makes sense if you're thinking of Charles Lindbergh. I guess that's what it's referring to. I don't even know, but I would just say exposure. That's the only thing I can think of, because people who have seen it bring it up and mention it.
Yeah, I hope it's not named after Charles Lindbergh, because his Triple Lindy was you circle the globe in a plane, your kid gets kidnapped, and then you're an anti-Semite. So I don't think anyone's trying to hit that trifecta right now.
And he was looking for the fountain of youth through these Teutonic sorcerer scientists. He went all the way, man. I read a pretty good book about that, actually.
Yeah, why do you think that this is one of the ones that's fading? Do you think it's because of some of those things that don't really hold up, as far as, because on paper, I kind of hate the premise, right? There's some racism, there's some classism, sexism, and those moments date horribly. But however, Dangerfield kind of has enough magic to still make it extremely charming. So,
but that wasn't a detriment when this movie was made.
No,
if you
not
remember
at all.
86,
right.
That was a feature, not a bug.
To the left, baby, to the left. Oh, that's the spot, baby. Hold it. Oh, you are there.
So it's kind of funny that more problematic movies hold up better, or just are more part of the zeitgeist, because Revenge of the Nerds was a 2-hour rape joke, and there's none of that in here, really. Not as he walks in on a girl in the shower, but Revenge of the Nerds, which people still talk about it's kind of weird that I don't think it was the problematic nature of this film that's kind of holding it back, because I think it's held up less than some worse movies.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been devolved into a boob comedy so quickly. Even the towel boy thing that was totally reminiscent of Revenge of the Nerds.
Mm-hmm.
And him walking in. It almost seemed like they wanted to get that one boob comedy element out of the way. Because I'll be honest with you, this one actually surprised me on this rewatch. I actually saw some stuff that I was surprised at how serious Dangerfield came off, and there was a couple of scenes of almost drama that came out of it.
I just want to see you happy, that's all.
Well, take a good look. Because I was a lot happier when I was miserable.
When I thought about, as a kid, I never thought about the weirdness of what all came about. It's okay, well, you got this guy, rags to riches, fat and tall stores, and diving, Like, where the hell does diving? That was such a weird entry for that.
Because
Like,
every 80s movie back in the day, and Jason and I have talked about this before, they always had to have a competition, right? Like in Better Off Dead, it was the ski competition, or, there was Totally Rad or Gleaming the Cube. Everything had to culminate in some kind of sports thing, and this one we get diving. So that
because nerds don't fight their bullies physically.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, not everything's Karate Kid.
Mm-hmm.
William Zabka
this is a little
take
bit
an ass kicking, but sometimes William Zabka just loses in a diving competition.
It was really interesting the way they had him come at him, and it was also interesting that he was actually on his team rather than a rival on a rival team. He was actually a team member. I thought that was really interesting.
I felt like his part got cut down a little bit.
Yeah, it does feel like there's.
I felt that way too.
Yeah. And the whole time you're waiting for it, right? Because you have that idea of who he is from the Karate Kid, and you're just at any time I was expecting like a spinning back kick to the crazy guy from Christine, but it never comes, and I'm just like, man, it does feel like there was like a fight scene or something cut. They're just like, there's just too much, like everything that we mentioned. That's just so much to fit in. We can't have a bully thing too, or like a traditional bully arc.
I like how Keith Gordon has successfully directed some of the best television shows in the last 20 years, and to you, he's just the guy from Christine.
Just the guy from Christine, because that movie fucks so hard.
Well, hey, man, it was weird because when I was watching this, I realized the connections that had occurred, because I read a lot of Robert Cormier, I Am the Cheese, like a bunch of kind of like preteen, weird conspiracy books and different things, like putting kids in danger and stuff. And he wrote The Chocolate War, so I saw that movie, and Keith Gordon directed that movie, and it's got Wyatt from Weird Science in it, and then you have Robert Downey Jr. in Weird Science in that little kind of like toady part.
That's Ian. This is Max. We call him Mad Max.
You got this, and everybody's all together. It's weird when you think about how like things lead to other things like that. But the TV, I didn't know that he had done so much television, and you're right about that. He killed in television. But The Chocolate War was awesome. That was the first place I heard that Kate Bush song. And
he made that like a year after he directed that, a year after he made this movie. Chocolate War's got a great cast too, if you look at it.
Oh yeah,
too, because it's almost as if it's kind of that Dead Poets Society potpourri, or like Chex Mix, where you got all these guys, and sooner or later they're going to show up. And yeah, it was great. It's like School Ties or something.
Yeah, it's got some of the best actors of the time, plus Adam Baldwin. Fuck that guy.
In his right place.
Right.
In his right place. That guy is rarely ever miscast. He's usually some kind of fuckhead, but
it's funny how a lot of those kind of type actors, those like kind of nerdy actors, like Keith Gordon or Oz Perkins, wound up directing Black Coat's Daughter, which is one of the more underrated like horror films of the last 10 years. And he was in like,
haven't checked that out yet.
And he was in like Quigley with like Gary Busey.
Well, that's not who I was going for, but yeah,
similar, right?
Quigley, the Gary Busey vehicle.
Well, yeah, Gary Busey plays a person that, like a businessman that dies and then gets resurrected as like a little Pomeranian.
Don't you tell anyone what you just saw here.
What?
Yeah.
I kind of like that Zabka's working again, because like for a while he was just like, what if I showed up on a TV show to either play myself or a parody of myself? Yeah. And now it's like I don't know if you're watching Cobra Kai, but that show is it's exactly what I wanted.
Did he do anything besides Karate Kid, like movie wise, like during this time?
He was in National Lampoon's European Vacation.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's one of the ones. That's one of the ones that I never really connected with for whatever reason.
I love that one. That's like my favorite.
I love that Night of the Creeps. I love that Night of the Creeps kid. So I should probably revisit it.
He did that TV show in '87 or '86, I think. The Equalizer. He was on that.
Oh yeah. Okay.
For like the whole season. Hasn't held up necessarily.
But before we get too deep into it, for anyone that hasn't seen this film, Jason, what is Back to School about?
Back to School is a movie about Rodney Dangerfield going back to school. He realizes he's in a shitty marriage and he doesn't have the relationship with his son that he'd like. So he decides, as soon as he asks his wife for a divorce, he drops in on his son on the first day of the new semester of the school year, just to sort of surprise him. And what he found out was that his relationship with his son was worse than he thought, because his son lied about being in a fraternity and being on the diving team. So his son was sort of making his college experience seem better than it was. And he told his dad he wanted to drop out. And so instead of letting him drop out of school, Rodney Dangerfield's character, who's a millionaire who has a line of basically big and tall businesses, he never went to college. He dropped out of high school and started working and eventually built up this business. So he regretted never having gone to college. So instead of letting his son drop out, he's like, what if I just made you live in the same dorm room as me? So he goes to college to embarrass his son, but also get an education. He does so by donating a building
to Dean Martin.
Yep, Dean Martin. Dean Martin, played by Ned Beatty.
Yeah, and who plays the diving coach, Jason?
Oh, the Walsh.
When do you
Walsh.
stop? Yeah, it's just like, when do you stop?
Walsh. It plays the diving coach. So he donates a building. A member of the faculty is not impressed. He ends up being his business teacher. So eventually he has to pass all of his final exams or he gets kicked out of school. There's a study cramming montage. Robert Downey Jr. in one of his early comedic roles.
Different hair in every scene. That's a great bit.
Yeah, a lot of famous people like Kurt Vonnegut and Danny Elfman play themselves in the movie. It's a good time.
That blew my mind. I was telling John about that earlier. That once I found out that was actually Kurt Vonnegut and not an actor playing him, that blew my mind.
Huh?
Hi, I'm Kurt Vonnegut. I'm looking for Thornton Mellon.
Want to come in, Dad?
The cast is insane. For anyone who would have, I mean, the first thing that I noticed, like looking over everything again, is that how often did either of you guys ever see a movie that was written by 4 people,
right,
and story credits by 3 people, and it ended up being coherent at all, even with this crazy ass mixture of shit that's in this movie?
I think one of those people, being Harold Ramis, was smart enough to be like, this is just, it doesn't matter what the dressing is, doesn't matter what the setting is. This was like a series of films. They were just a vehicle for Rodney Dangerfield to be in a different situation to tell his one-liners. And this was no different. They let him, be Rodney Dangerfield. That was what people were paying for. I think they accidentally made a better movie than they thought they were trying to, because I think this one holds up better as far as like the chuckles go and like making me laugh than any of the other ones that he did. Like Ladybugs it's funny, but it's not this.
Really? What's funny about Ladybugs?
Why don't you respect Ladybugs?
I'll tell you. I mean, look, the screenwriters from this movie were responsible for Clifford, Real Genius, everything Harold Ramis wrote. Yeah. One of the guys wrote Clifford, the other guy wrote Real Genius, a bunch of episodes of WKRP in Cincinnati, Caddyshack 2, which I wasn't going to mention because that's not a credit.
I love Caddyshack 2, but it's only because, I see it completely divorced. I mean, it's not even the same. There's no DNA. Even with Chevy showing up, that's just, it could have been a hologram.
So, like, there's good writing behind this movie. It hit a lot of the comedic beats that movies in the 80s needed to hit, for better or worse. He's like, you got to have the topless shot in there.
You're perfect.
That was just the thing that they did back then. But I think if you look at other kind of boner comedies of the time, as much as like people don't still talk about this, I think it holds up better than worse movies like shit like Up the Academy. Yeah, I think more people have heard of this than Porky's, maybe, but I think it also holds up better than Revenge of the Nerds, which is a lot cringier on rewatching.
And that's like an institution.
Like Bodies or Hunk.
Yeah.
Those were big HBO staples too. I probably saw Hunk 1,000 times.
It worked so well because him just walking around a campus, him just like as an old dude in like a bathrobe, it was just funny. It was just so weird. And that was what they kept trying to capture, capture lightning in a bottle every time. It's just like, what if we make him a soccer coach? And it's like, but there's old dudes doing soccer coaching. That's not outlandish. Like, this being Billy Madison, the sequel, but that came first, works better than that.
Don't you say that. Don't you ever say that. Stay here. Stay as long as you can. For the love of God, cherish it.
Jennifer, why don't you try reading out loud for a minute, okay?
Oh, I didn't even think about that connection. That makes sense.
Yeah. Sally Kellerman, she was in Matt. William Zabka. Sam Kinison.
That's enough.
Yeah, he does one Sam Kinison rant, and it just so happened to be one of the most racist parts of the movie, so that's kind of unfortunate, but...
I was today years old when I realized I recognized Terry Farrell from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I was like, just looking at her, I was like, where have I seen her?
And Terry Farrell, looking at her, looking down at Keith Gordon, I was like, okay.
That's a great scene.
This is the one that took you away from... Is it Chaz? Chad?
Yeah. Chaz.
Yeah.
Chaz.
Chad is kind of a douchey name, but Chaz is the guy who will fake an injury to make you have to do your special dive.
I have got a really bad cramp.
The name that he calls him, once he asks him if it's menstrual cramps, it was almost like the Neo Maxi Zoom Dweeby, except he says Fleeb at the end.
Oh.
I can't remember the beginning of
just to date it that much more. Danny Elfman being in this was shocking and jarring. That was like, for whatever reason, the only thing that I didn't remember during the rewatch. I'm like, oh shit, that's Danny Elfman. He sings with his mouth so open. It was very, very uncomfortable.
The same thing. When he says more, you do not need to open your mouth that much to say more.
You get so much teeth. Yeah.
I'm not going to give music advice to Danny Elfman, it turns out. Did you know that this movie was nominated for an MTV Video Music Award, and it wasn't for Dead Man's Party. It was for the Twist and Shout music video.
What the fuck? That is a travesty of the universe right there.
Well, I don't know, man. Maybe Oingo Boingo is the back to school of bands, because nobody has heard of Oingo Boingo in Year of Our Lord 2021.
How unfortunate.
Probably not. I mean, but I have to say, Dead Man's Party, like when I was a kid,
that was the hit.
It made me seek out Danny Elfman. I loved that song, and then when I found out that he had done the score and that it was his second score of all time, I was like, what the fuck? Like, I would say that Danny Elfman. I was thinking earlier today that Danny Elfman is kind of like John Williams in that he's done a couple of, I mean, slightly like John Williams, but later on they were either doing iconic stuff that you always remember, or it just fades into the background. Danny Elfman can totally fade into the background, but then he can also do, but it's always a that always comes out in everything he's doing. So
very violent.
They made fun of that on Family Guy when John Williams was killed by stormtroopers on the Family Guy Star Wars, and they're like, Danny Elfman's going to do the music, and then they did a very Danny Elfman score. That was brutal. As much as I like Danny Elfman, everything is kind of Pee Wee Herman's Breakfast Machine.
It's a little samey.
It's not 100%, but everything is at least 10%.
Yeah. Yep. Talk about some scenes. What are, like, when you think back fondly, especially you two being the fans that you are, and I keep saying, like, you guys are fans of this. We definitely watched it in my household when I was younger, but when I was a kid, I just did not find Rodney Dangerfield funny whatsoever. I found him quite annoying and off-putting for whatever reason. Now that I'm old, I don't know if it's just because I'm getting dad jokes more or whatever, but I find them completely charming now. Thinking back on the movie, what are some of the scenes that like really stick out in Back to School for you guys?
There's obviously the most famous scene in the movie, probably, which is the successful triple Lindy, where he does a dive that incorporates all of the diving boards and the diving pool, not just the high platform, but he jumps down to a lower diving board and springboards off of it.
Where they PA, we need to install extra boards. And doing like what, 15 seconds to install like 2 other diving boards. Very impressive.
Yeah, I would have thought it would have taken longer than that, but that's just...
Robert Downey Jr.'s contribution to the film sort of gets forgotten about, but I think he's very funny as Derek. And just kind of like that one troublemaking friend you have in college who's just super duper left wing and sort of a troublemaker. I think he got in trouble a lot, and I think that was always pretty funny. Him just jacking things up for the establishment. Where he says, "Are you going for this Associated Artist thing?" And then he like jumps off.
Oh, do me! Derek, get up, will you? You look like the poster boy for birth control.
And he totally showed tremendous backbone when he was going up against Chaz in that party and at the registration. It was a really unusual mix of stuff. And
Jason, to piggyback off yours, for whatever reason, my favorite scene in this entire film, and I don't know why, is the reveal that he could dive when he just out of nowhere dives into the... And his friends is like, what the hell was that? I don't know why. I had to pause it because I was like belly laughing until I was crying. I had a little bit of tequila last night, so that might have been a contributing factor, but I just thought that was the funniest shit ever, where they're just like talking, and it's coming off of like him catching his wife cheating on him, and then just like, you know, he's like talking to his buddy, and then just out of nowhere he does this like crazy flip into his own pool, and it just hit me the right way, and I just lost my shit. So that vividly, you know,
it was really
out.
Clumsy backstory. It's like, oh, by the way, I can dive.
Yeah.
Why? It'll come up later. I have no idea why.
Right.
I like Robert Picardo just kind of.
Oh yeah.
Mr. Mallon, we was just looking for some cocktail napkins.
Jumping out again. It's like, what?
Yes.
This movie's crazy. You were talking about Sally Kellerman and the MASH thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a shame that the business guy wasn't somebody more noteworthy.
Well,
Like
Paxton Whitehead he worked in the UK a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seems to me that, like, especially since like that MASH connection, that if they would have gotten, I can't remember who played Winchester in the television show. It seems like he could have waltzed right into that. Definitely the Vonnegut scene stuck out for me, especially with kind of like the bookend where he says, "And another thing, Vonnegut, I'm canceling this check." And it's like, fuck me. Fuck you.
It's because he got like he got a C or a D on his paper. It's like, whoever wrote this obviously doesn't know anything about Kurt Vonnegut.
Love it. Especially since Vonnegut like allowed that was just great. I remember. Well, I mean, the Oingo Boingo thing always, because I always thought it was weird that they had 2 bands, like bar bands. I guess he was like hired, or they were hired in the big apartment or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it was weird to have 2 of them. I would say a big one that sticks out for me is the Dylan Thomas recitation thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking like, holy shit, I'm being moved by Rodney Dangerfield right now, you know? And especially since like I've since lost my dad and I've since become a dad. So like watching that, it brought a lot of stuff back for me. So weird to say that about Back to School, but that was definitely a thing where it kind of showed the difference between this and other stuff, is that, you know, when you have Ned Beatty and M. Emmett Walsh and all these guys, it's almost impossible to make it so goofy that it doesn't have something of merit in it with all that going for it.
Yeah, and like you said, this actually had, which the other Rodney Dangerfield vehicles for Yuck Yucks didn't have, were those like kind of quieter moments. And yes, he would still like insert his little one-liners, who's just like, you know, I married my ex-wife, and when I said I do, I should have said with who, you know, like he still had to do his shtick throughout, but there was those moments where it was like, there is some really sadness, like there's some real sadness behind this comedy and behind this joke, where like, you know, back then, maybe people that were just shoving their face with popcorn and watching this in the theater didn't get. Maybe they're just like, he's such a cad, he's such a maroon. But it's just like, oh shit, like you watch it nowadays and it's just like, there is a little bit more substance to this than some of his other ones.
You pick up on the good headache. She gives good headache.
There's a lot of little jokes. I feel like if you're laughing, you'll miss.
Yeah,
that's right.
That was one that I picked up on this time. It was awesome.
So, with blemishes and all, would either of you recommend this film to someone in 2021 that hasn't seen it? And we'll start with Corey.
Absolutely. I definitely would. I think that it's got much more going for it than I really have this idea that before college happens, you get all that stuff out of the way that we were talking about. You get the stuff with the cerveza at the bar, with a little bit of racist shit towards his like underling or whatever. And then you get, well, I mean, I guess when he first arrives, the boob thing happens and different stuff. It seems like, it doesn't quite seem like two different movies. I think that it kind of like gets those check marks knocked off and then it kind of, it grows. So I would definitely recommend it. There are definitely things that people would have, would bring up, but I don't think that it's so much that it would take away.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends who it is, but like, if it's somebody who likes to watch comedy and kind of understands this is from a different era, I think it holds up.
Yeah, I echo that sentiment as well. I think I wouldn't recommend this to 100% of people, but I would recommend this to people that like this comedy, like my father-in-law, like or like that kind of mind frame, kind of like boomers will love this movie, but also people that understand that comedy has evolved over the years. And it's just another thing, because really Dangerfield was one of those comedians that was more wholesome and more family friendly, and like I shied away from even like showing my kids this because there's some real crazy shit. So I can only imagine how hard it is and what a minefield it is to be like a comedian in 2021.
I think that Sally Kellerman was a rare commodity in this movie because she was totally okay with dating two guys at once. She was okay with blowing off the guy who was kind of he wasn't a dickhead to her, but he was just like a dickhead. And she was okay with being a free spirit. She felt comfortable. She felt powerful. She was also okay saying that she didn't like a guy that was too soft necessarily. So I think that she was so dynamic that she could show a lot of love interest from this time period, a thing or two. And I think that it kind of moves a little bit further towards the 21st century with the way she was kind of like pouring herself. So
yeah, she brought some real weight to that role, where a lot of other, I mean, she was a little flippant. She was written a little flippant, but as for 1986 in this type of role, they gave her as much to do as one could, I think. Great rewatch. I was kind of cringing when Jason mentioned this, and I'm just like, this is going to be one of those times where I'm going to watch something that I loved back in the day and that I hate now. This is going to be So I Married an Axe Murderer 2.0, and I can't like hate something that I used to love.
Right, a lot.
Hudson Hawk was a big blemish, but we'll move past that.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. John doesn't like Hudson Hawk, and I still podcast.
Oh man. Love it. I love it so much. Anytime you ever want to talk about it, Jason, I'll talk about it all night long. I love that movie.
Why do I podcast with John? He doesn't like anything.
I will die on that hill. And I have, like, I've not met someone else that doesn't like Hudson Hawk. I don't know. I don't belong in this world.
There's
apparently.
A word for that, John. You're wrong.
That's 2 words.
Yeah.
Either way, that is our thoughts on Back to School from 1986. Thank you for watching. Where can everyone find everyone? Corey Dawson, our critic in the field, delivering that info on the Triple Lindy. Where can everyone find you, sir?
You can find me occasionally on Cinema Degeneration, Cameron Scott's retrospective on stuff. He started a show for me called Without Warning, where he just calls me up in the middle of the night and doesn't give me any forewarning and says, "Hey, what do you think about this thing in cinema?" I'm like, I think that.
It's a hell of a premise.
I know, love it. I love it. That's my type right there. And I've got some. I'm looking to get back into the Diabolical Index on YouTube. I've been on hiatus for a good long while. We just had a little boy, so a lot of stuff has gotten in the way. But hopefully, I'll be coming back to that and a bunch of different things. They're only kind of like half brought up, so I don't want to talk about them too much. So,
all right. Jason E. Alt, where can you direct people on the Bird site to check out your pin post?
I'm on Twitter at Jason E. Alt. You should be able to figure out how to spell that.
Yes, I am at John the Host. You can follow me at The Cult of Films. You could also check this out in podcast form on iTunes and Spotify. Leave us triple, double, or single Lindys. Like, we'll take all the Lindys. We do not discriminate at all. So thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.